everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Anne Walsh. Hi, Anne. How are you?
Oh, hi, Kathy. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be here. Very excited.
I love everything I've done with you, and I am so excited to introduce people to your book. This book, you can see it's sort of dog-eared. That's the first book, and I got this around Christmas, so I haven't gotten to read it yet. Here's number 2. So, okay. So, Anne, I'm introduced to you by our mutual friend, and she tells me that you're an investigative reporter, a researcher. Researcher, and you have a very you have a capability to go into facts and really find the truth. You have this skill that's very unique, that you read about a story and then you can sort of find the path into the truth. So this book is the truth about Paul McCartney and how he was murdered in 1966, but it's written as a novel, so nobody gets in trouble, right?
Yeah, that is correct. It's a historical fiction.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So I started reading this book and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll read it. And then it was like, oh my God, it's true. It is true. This book is so good. It's easy to read. It's so good. So, okay, so tell us how, I think I know the answer, but tell everyone else here how this book came to be.
Well, I started researching the Paul is dead rumor back in 2011. It kind of just fell into my lap. I love unsolved mysteries. I always say I'm kind of like Scooby-Doo, you know, give me some unsolved mystery. I want to solve it so bad because of the victims that are involved in it, or any mystery. I will research it to the best of my ability. So I've been a Beatle fan since I was 5 years old. I heard Band on the Run on the radio, and I thought it was the greatest song ever written. I just didn't know who it was. And then when I was 11 years old, I was introduced to the Beatles and became an instant fan. And I saw the picture of Paul McCartney and I'm just like, oh, he's my Beatle. So throughout my teenage years, you know, I read all the Beatle biographies I could get my hands on, and I collected all the memorabilia. And this is, 1980s when I was a teenager. So I knew about the rumor. I believed the story, that it was just a hoax. It was just a mistake. It was just a misunderstanding by the fans, and that the American fans were responsible for starting this rumor. So I'm like, okay, well, that's a very unfortunate thing. But in 2011, I came across a movie, and it was called The Last Testament of George Harrison. And I was pretty surprised that the rumor of Paul McCartney's death was starting to come back into the public eye after being gone for 40 years or so. But the thing with the rumor is it started in the United States in 1969, but it actually started in London in 1966. That's what my research has showed. So it has never really totally gone away, and it's never been explained either. So I knew about that rumor. And so I watched this movie, and I was able to just, take apart the parts that were not true. And I thought, well, there's too many discrepancies in the story. I don't believe it. So I just let it be. Uh-huh. Well, that's a song. I did. Perfect. One of my favorite songs, actually. So it wasn't until 2013 when I started researching 9/11. And this rumor of Paul McCartney just kept coming up on my computer. And I'm like, what is this? Why do I keep seeing Paul McCartney's picture or something? So once I finished my research on 9/11 and I kind of concluded that it was an inside job, I don't believe the official story, then I was looking for something else to research. And I thought, well, I'm a huge Beatle fan. I'll just take it up and just go down memory lane, rediscover their music, and just enjoy it, right? I did not expect to find what I found.
Unbelievable.
So after about 3 months into my research, I thought, well, there is something here. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence here. And then after 6 months, my head knew that it was true. The rumor was true. I just couldn't come to terms with it because being such a big fan and loving his music, it's hard to accept that I've been deceived for 45 years or more, whatever. So that was really hard. And then after a year, I just accepted it. And I decided I need to do something about it because this man was murdered and no one knows really.
Right.
A small group of people that know. And there's so much circumstantial evidence that there's got to be truth in it.
Yeah.
You can't have all these sudden deaths after his alleged death. You start seeing people just dying in mysterious ways in the Beatles circle.
Right.
Alone is just,
well, even they went from those bobblehead haircuts and kind of the Beach Boys were even starting to get their hair a little bit longer. It wasn't all military cut guys, but they started that whole trend. And then all of a sudden they're into the Guru Maharishi. And I mean, they went through this just humongous personality change that if you look at other actors, you look at Prince, you look at Michael Jackson, it took them a long time to morph into something else. These guys, like something happened that turned the corner so quickly and created a whole different, I mean, there's still love songs. I mean, compared to what the music is now, the rap and everything, I still like the love songs. I know all the words. You know what I understand them. Yeah, but what isn't so much that, it's they're full of hope and the other's anger to me. That's the difference. But the fact that, we were watching James Bond movies, we were watching, even Maxwell Smart with the phone, his shoe phone. And we were thinking, oh, well, the 3-letter institutions are protecting us and know best for us and all of that, that was necessary in the world. And then when you sense that the betrayal is part of the manipulation of those kind of agencies, and how thoroughly effective they were, it's like, what were we doing? We weren't paying any attention.
And that was part of the game, is to totally, black out the masses, the people, and don't let them know and manipulate them the way they want. It's all about control and manipulation and to bring forth a one world government. That's the end game. That's what they want. And what we see today, it's everywhere.
Well, tell us about, because this was part of the thing that really got me, was the British invasion. When I heard that, it was like, Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton and it was like, bring it on. And the British invasion, I had no idea, like, oh my God, that was actually a controlled program.
To bring about a cultural change in the American societies. And so, yeah, that was engineered, I think it was. But I also thoroughly believe that these bands, these British bands that came over during the invasion of 64, they didn't know.
Right.
No, they were just, hey, they're young men. And they're like, hey, we got our music out there and we got this fame and people love our music and this is great. Not realizing that they were pawns.
Right. Right. Well, but and again, that's when you think about any of these managers to the athletes and the actors and the actresses and the musicians. A lot of the talented people were really abused. They were used and manipulated extremely. I mean, Michael Jackson's a perfect example of that. But okay, so let's go back to the English invasion. These are these like kind of they're womanizer men because they're cute as anything, and they especially Paul.
Yeah. Handsome, yes.
Yeah, I remember my sister just crying, Paul, Paul, with tears coming down her face. Okay, so they go from this to this other persona. And do you want to explain a little bit about what you found out about that? Because I think people will sort of go, oh yeah, what difference does it make? But it does make a difference, all of this information.
Sure. Yeah, it does make a big difference. We have to be aware of what the government is capable of doing against us, the people.
Right.
So here you have these bands and they're coming over here and, they're making great music. They're pouring money into Britain, and the Beatles were England's biggest export at that time.
Wow.
So yeah, so they were the biggest import. They actually held the UK economy in their hands. So it was important that they kept going to keep money going for the crown. And of course, they weren't receiving much money themselves. Right. It was all going to all other people, the managers and, the government. So anyways, what we see after Paul's alleged death in, 67, we see that whole different change. They started going into that drug culture. And the Monterey Pop, for instance, in 67, that was a CIA operation to introduce drugs into the society. Not only LSD, but other drugs. So unfortunately, you have a group of people and they're gathering together. They want to do a peaceful protest. They're all about love and peace. And then all of a sudden they're getting laced with LSD. So when you look at who helped put that festival together, you have Paul's replacement in there.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and then you have, the Mamas and Papas and some other bands members of other bands that got together and put that Monterey Pop Festival together. But what happened? Yeah, there's a lot of drugs going on there and a lot of LSD going on there. So George Harrison, goes to the Monterey Pop and he's thinking, oh, this is great. I'm going to go and these people are here to promote love and peace. It's a big art. He thought it was an art fest that he was going to go to, and he was all excited about it. So he goes to the Monterey Pop, and when he gets there, he's very upset. He's very disappointed because he sees these people laced with LSD and other drugs, and people are coming up to him and calling him Jesus Christ, and it freaked him out. So he had to leave, and he talked about this, so that's something that actually happened to George. So yeah, and prior to that, starting in 1965, the Beatles were being laced with LSD against their will and knowledge. So I
Right,
think that
wasn't it his dentist? It was Paul's dentist?
it was
Or-
their dentist. Yeah, and his name was Dr. John Riley, and he invited George and John over for dinner, laced their coffee with LSD without their knowledge or consent, and they tripped for 3 days
Oh
on
my
LSD.
God, can you imagine it if, well, I haven't ever done LSD. I've done little other stuff, but not that. But I can imagine, I mean, that's, how would you function? Especially if you didn't decide to do it, all of a sudden your world's moving and swirling and has colors. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and George didn't even know what it was, and it was John that did.
Oh, of
And
course.
so, John got George, and they hightailed it out of the dentist's house and went to John's house, where they tripped for like 3 days or something like that. It was a long time before they were able to come down off of that. But they were being laced against their will and knowledge. And what we have, today is they have this reputation of being a bunch of druggies, doing marijuana, doing, LSD. Hey, they were all part of the 60s. But what I have found in my research prior to 1967, that it was being done against their will. And George even said so. He said that they would go to these dinner parties, and the lacing of the LSD was so bad that they had to bring their own drinks because they didn't want to trip.
Wow. Can you imagine? I mean, here
Yeah.
you are, like the rock stars that they were. You would think that, well, that must have been the culture, right? That the everyone else at the dinner party was doing that. But wow.
Yeah, I think they were targeted as a way to control them.
Right.
Because they were very anti-establishment.
Right.
And they told the truth about what was going on at that time. They spoke out against high taxes in England. They called out the Prime Minister Wilson and said, hey, lower the taxes on the lower class. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Stop it.
And that wasn't what they wanted at all. So
Oh.
tell us about what you found about them being part of the they were given the designation. They were not knighted, but they were designated as part of the crown. So is that the same thing that Elton John was done, or is Elton John different?
Yeah, I think he's knighted now.
Oh,
So
okay.
from what I understand from talking to a few friends of mine, when you become a member of the British Empire, you become part of the crown. And the crown is made up of the royals, parliament, and British intelligence. That's the 3 entities. So when you become a member of the British Empire, you enter into a secret society. And it's your first step to becoming knighted.
Oh,
So yeah, that's why Ringo and Sir Paul or Billy, they're knighted. And actually Billy's been knighted twice. So he's very high up there
it's like
in the secret societies and in like the crown, I guess. I'm not really sure, but that's what I kind of see it as. He's way up there.
okay.
So yeah, so the way the Beatles became members of the British Empire was very underhanded. They didn't even know what it was. When they got the notice that they were going to become members of the British Empire, John thought this is just some award, so he took the notice and threw it in the trash. He didn't know what it was.
And he probably, and but that was his person. That is the way you think of him, is that he was his own man.
Yes, he was his own man. So Brian Epstein actually was a criminal, and he tried to evade his taxes, and he got caught. So Wilson, Prime Minister Wilson came to him and made an agreement and said, if you pay your taxes like you're supposed to, and you make the Beatles become members of the British Empire, then we'll make all this go away for you. So Brian Epstein sold them basically to the crown to control them because they were against war and we had Vietnam going on. They were pro civil rights, which was still an issue in the southern states in the United States. And they got into a lot of trouble for that.
Right.
They toured down in the southern states. Again, they were against the taxes, and Paul was also very interested in finding out who killed our president, President Kennedy.
Right. Right.
And he was even dropping a little hints of who actually did it.
Wow.
Yeah, because they were asked, how did you feel when our President Kennedy was assassinated? And Paul said, well, they're idiots. Idiots being plural. They're idiots for doing it, which is idiots is plural. And of course, Lee Harvey Oswald is just a single person, so it should have been, he's an idiot.
Yeah.
But he said idiots. So it was like those little things. He was dropping hints of truth.
And they couldn't control him, so the drugs probably were the disorientation, so you weren't sure what your reality was, but if that is just bizarre when you think about all of this, that the crown could have controlled and replaced Paul McCartney with somebody who's taller, doesn't look exact. I mean, he's pretty good match, but he's not exactly. He's left. Paul was left-handed. He's right. Billy's right-handed. I mean, there's when I started doing this and I was looking at videos and everything. Oh my God, Anne, it's true. They replaced him.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul I'll give you an example. Paul was a very efficient bass player. When you watch him perform in his live concerts, their songs were 3 minutes long. He looks at his bass about 3 times in a 3-minute song. So once every minute. When you watch his replacement play, he's constantly looking at his bass, trying to figure out where his fingers are because he's not left-handed.
Right. So he had
just those little subtleties, that you catch.
Wow.
And Paul would bounce a lot because he's trying to keep the beat.
Right.
And he was like the conductor and he kept everybody in time. So he would bounce and because they couldn't hear each other.
Right.
So he used a lot of body language to give the other guys clues of where they were in the song. But you don't see that like in the rooftop concert that they did, or you don't see that.
Well, I mean, can you imagine being the rest of the band and seeing what they just replaced their closest friend? I mean, these guys have been friends, John and John specifically, but I think George had been good friends for years and years. And all of a sudden he didn't play the game the way the crown wanted, so they just replaced him. And so that had to have put a shock into everybody. I mean, your whole, well, you can see they're just not gleeful. They were having a good time.
They love performing, they love being together, they love being in front of an audience and playing. They were a live band, and you see that brotherhood, on stage and how they just clicked together. And you don't see that. And I think the movie that just came out, Get Back, shows that there's just not that bond anymore.
Right.
There's a lot of contention still there, which is understandable. He's not who he says he is.
Right. So, okay. So you mentioned Billy's name a couple of times. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
There's so many things I could ask about this.
Okay.
Okay, so Linda McCartney, who I have her cookbook downstairs, who I think it was amazing. She knew that wasn't the real Paul because she had photographed the real Paul in New York and then afterwards went to London and fell in love. And then you find out that Yoko Ono went to the same school that she went to, prep school. Like, what's going on? Was that all arranged?
Well, from what I have gathered in my research, I think it was. Yoko claimed that she didn't know who the Beatles were when she met John Lennon on November 9th, 1966 at her exhibit at the art gallery in London. Well, on the Howard Stern show.
That's valuable research. He's amazing.
On the Howard Stern show, he interviewed Paul McCartney in, I think it was 2001, when he was dating Heather Mills, who became his second wife. He said that he knew Yoko before John did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in another interview, again with Howard Stern, and that was done a couple of years later, he again said that he knew Yoko about a year before John did. And she would just kept coming over to his house and visit, but he finally got sick of her and told her where John lived and to go get John, because Yoko said she wanted John Lennon. So that when I heard that on the Howard Stern show, I was surprised. So I went and looked into it, and it doesn't add up. Okay, if the Paul we see today is really Paul McCartney, it doesn't add up. Simply because he said that Yoko Ono went to his house about a year before she met John Lennon. So that puts you in November of 65.
Right.
Paul didn't own a home.
Oh my gosh.
In London.
So it was Billy's home.
Right. Paul actually owned a home on Cavendish, but was under renovation and he wasn't living there. He didn't move into that home on Cavendish until April of 66.
Wow.
So that puts his replacement, Billy, seeing Yoko Ono before John Lennon met Yoko.
Well, okay, so they got away with it though. I mean, this is what's just amazing to me is that, I mean, look at all the music, Wings, and all the music that's been done since, and how drastically the Yellow Submarine. I mean, you look at the whole change in the Beatles. They still made a huge impact, but just wonder what they would have done. They would have changed the blues. They would have changed a whole other different aspect of music. We wouldn't have had the same culture.
That's true. I believe that's true. Paul would have taken it in a different direction.
Love songs.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and some rock songs, and he was a great rocker.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. They really liked Chuck Berry. I mean, they liked the old fashioned rock music or blues music. That's what, and so did Eric Clapton. I mean, if you look at the roots of the music, it's not really English or Irish music, which is interesting. It could have easily been Irish music. There's so many Americans that are of Irish descent that they could have easily stayed in that venue. But then all of a sudden it just went from like happy-go-lucky love songs to this like deep, like, it wasn't angry, but it was not happy music.
Very depressed.
You're right.
And John said they were just stating how they were feeling at the time they wrote the song.
Well, it makes
You take a look at the White Album. I think the White Album as a whole is very sad and depressing album as a whole.
Well, yeah, and you look at the
Great song.
cover picture, and Paul was the same height. The real Paul was the same height as everybody, and then the new Paul, the replacement's 3 inches taller, and he's the one without shoes on, walking across the road.
Right. On a hot day, he took sandals off and walked across hot asphalt. I would think his feet would have maybe burned a little bit.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. Well, I mentioned to you that I had told somebody who's a very famous videographer and filmmaker about your book, and he was fascinated. And he does things where he looks at film footage and says, well, what would I have done? Like, what would the masters, what would Scorsese have done? And he said the placement on the roof, that video of them all on the roof, where they placed Billy, the fake Paul, at another angle so you couldn't tell he was behind another angle so you couldn't tell he was taller. So he goes, that's exactly what I would have done. He said that, you know, from the lighting and the placement, he goes, that's what I would have done. And it's like, wow. I mean, they didn't miss a beat.
No, they didn't.
So, okay, so here in this book, I don't want anyone to get confused with my questioning of you, because you have to read the book.
Thank you so much.
You do, and see, dog-eared, I read it twice already, and I got a lot more the second time, and I think I got a little wet the second time, but because I had it, it's like anytime I could read. What do you want to come of this, and then how? And then, of course, I want to talk about the new one because I haven't gotten to read it yet. But
okay, no problem.
What do you want? I mean, this is not just, it's a historical novel because you can't point fingers, but what do you want people to get from this book?
I'm hoping people will understand what our government is capable of doing.
Okay.
And to know the truth about Paul, that he was murdered. It wasn't just a car accident.
Right.
And I want them to understand the motives behind it. He was a great humanitarian. He spoke the truth, and he spoke from the heart, and his fans were everything to him. He loved his fans, and he loved children. And that's another issue also, was that Brian Epstein was a pedophile.
Right.
And
he was gay and a pedophile.
Yeah, he was a homosexual, and at that time, homosexuality in the United Kingdom was a crime.
Oh, okay.
So, and it didn't become legal until 1967 after Brian died.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's fine, but when you put in the pedophilia, and he was part of the Jimmy Savile pedophile ring that was going on in London.
Okay.
And Jimmy Savile was a BBC host, and the BBC covered this pedophile ring up. And Savile became knighted by the Queen, became really good friends with Prince Charles, had total immunity from any crimes he did. You couldn't convict him of anything as long as he was alive.
Wow.
But he was the ringleader of a pedophile ring, and Brian Epstein was part of that.
Okay.
And the mob ran that pedophile ring, Ron and Reggie Cray. So that's why the Crays, the mob, was around Brian Epstein. The Crays wanted to manage the Beatles. So they were on the Beatles outside ring. And that's the only one that I could point a finger of who could have possibly have murdered him, been contracted to kill him.
Right.
And then the government obviously are the only ones capable of covering up something of this magnitude, just like the John F. Kennedy assassination. It's been covered up for 60 plus years. So I would like people just to understand that the motives behind why he was murdered and taken out
Wow.
and replaced. And they had to replace them because they had to keep the money coming in.
Well,
Export.
how do you think it would be if something like that happened today? It seems like back then we were, TV there were still some people only on black and white TVs, and color was just coming, I guess. And maybe we were a little easier to fool back then than we are now, because information, I want to believe that. I know it's probably naive as anything, but information now it is so available all over the internet, and people talk now. Do you feel like this could still? I mean, is this going to help crack open things for current day?
I think
politics.
I think so. I mean, people are starting to investigate into all different kind of subjects of what the government is doing, and it is our responsibility to keep an eye on what our government is doing, especially if it's against us. So I believe that there is hope, that the truth of Paul will be known, and the truth of many different conspiracies will be known, because these things kind of link all the way back to the 50s and 60s and even into the 40s when this started, with the end of World War II.
Right.
And our president formed the CIA, and the rest is history, as they say.
Right. Well, yeah, and I've been following the UFO stuff and everything too. So I mean, there's so much stuff that it's like, why won't they just let us know? Well, follow the money, right? That's we're not supposed to get free energy because somebody else benefits from us not having free energy. But in your case, this is something that really, I was shocked that I mean, it was like, oh my God, it's true. That's all I can say, is that I have no doubt after reading this.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
have no doubt.
I've been researching this 10 years, and my co-author, Marianne, she's been in it for 3 going on 4 years now. So we are dedicated to getting this truth out, and the truth out about many other things that's going on. So as the book series continues, it kind of goes away from the Paul is dead rumor, and we venture off into other things that happen in our society.
Okay, so is that what this is?
That's shadow dancing.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we have in shadow dancing, in order to continue the story, because John Lennon has been murdered by this time.
Okay.
And of course, Paul is murdered. So our 2 main characters are now deceased. So in order to carry on the storyline, we have Paul's son growing up, and he's now a young man. He's 18 years old. And now he's trying to find out more about what happened to his father and what happened to John Lennon. But along the way, he's discovering other things that have gone wrong in our government.
Oh, okay, good. So that's what I have to look forward to. Well, yeah. At the very end of this, I didn't want to, it's like a cliffhanger. I don't want to spill the beans. Honestly, it was like, Anne, how soon can I have the next book? Because I just finished it. Now I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But you guys, this honestly, this will make you, well, it depends on what age group you're in, but if you are or were a Paul McCartney fan, it will totally change the way you look at the music industry, at at how powerful music is, and how responsible we need to be with what we ingest, because it is, I mean, the books we read, the videos we watch, the music we listen to does affect our consciousness on such a huge level.
Right, it's the frequencies in the music. And, there's good frequencies for your brain. I mean, our brain is brain waves, is frequency.
Right.
We, receive information, and we also transmit frequencies. So the music we listen to is very important. And that's what we go into a Shadow of the Bass Band. It is the frequencies and how they affect the brain. And you have good music that makes you feel happy, like the Beatles music, and brings hope, and that kind of the positive message that they brought. And then you can have frequencies going the other way that will destroy your brain, and actually make your two hemispheres fight against each other.
Well, yeah, the people talk about 432 and 440. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or about how there were frequencies?
Yeah, there's like 7 good frequencies that are uplifting, and they're called, I've heard them called as God frequencies.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, and it just make you feel happy and positive and joyous. And then there's other frequencies that brings you the other way, makes you very sad, depressed. It's like when you watch a movie and you're watching a romantic movie, they play romantic music, get you feeling romantic, right?
Right.
But if you're watching a suspenseful movie and you've got Freddy Krueger chasing after somebody, you remember those movies? And he's chasing after somebody, you got that music playing, you get that hyper sensitivity,
Yes.
and it makes you feel scared, and you feel the movie. So yeah, music plays a huge role in how you feel
Right.
in your brain.
Well, and I think that wasn't there a part that the music was actually tampered with when it after it was recorded?
That's the backward masking.
Yes.
Yes.
Talk about that, because you remember, for everybody that's listening, if you are a Beatles fan, you remember people talking about how you could make this on a LP, you could make it go backwards, and it would say Paul is a walrus, and then it would say the walrus is dead if you went backwards, right? Something like that.
Yeah, you play the records backwards. Like if you play Revolution 9 backwards, number nine in the forward recording, when you play that backwards on an LP, it becomes Turn Me On, Dead Man. And if you take the song I'm So Tired from the White Album, at the very end, it sounds like John is speaking French, and John knew French.
Yeah.
But if you play that backwards, it says Paul is dead, miss him, miss him, miss him. So those were done in the studio at the time of the recording. And that's the only time that could have been embedded into that song, was at the time of the recording. And that came from a sound engineer.
Right. So the people that were close to them had to know, and they had to be scared to death to not say anything. I mean, they when Brian was murdered, and I mean, they watched everybody. It's sort of anyway. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's like how it is true. That's all I can say is that if this whole thing is true, I think everyone should read it. I think it'll give you a whole different look at your reality, and it will start to unpeel the onion on so many levels of using your critical mind rather than just taking the media's storyline. It'll allow you to look at everything with a discerning eye.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
yes. And okay, so one other thing, I believe the other thing that really helped me know this was true is that Paul McCartney was a womanizer. I mean, he had fun.
You loved women.
And that's okay, because I mean, at his age and everything, and that amount of fame and that amount of visibility out of a poor neighborhood and in England, and then to that, it's like, wow, how could you even imagine that? But there were paternity suits that were filed on Billy, which is the fake Paul, and the DNA didn't match.
That's correct. Oh, well, yeah, the blood test didn't match. At that time, they didn't have DNA, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was about 85, 86. So DNA wasn't out yet, but yeah, the blood test showed that the daughter was not his, the girl, yeah, the young.
But it was probably the real Paul's.
Well, the mother did say in court that the man in court being Paul McCartney is not the Paul McCartney I knew in 1960 when she dated him in Hamburg, Germany in 1960 and 1961.
Okay, so that's one of the big clues. And then also they go to Germany after Paul's been replaced, and was it Japan or Germany where Billy gets thrown into jail?
Oh, that was his drug bust in 1980. That was in January 1980. He goes to Japan and he got busted for marijuana. Yeah, and he spent 9 days in a Japanese jail.
And
Like 7 years hard labor for as much marijuana as he brought into the country.
well,
Yeah.
Okay, so tell the audience a little bit about that, because the reason they held him is the blood sample didn't match.
Well, yeah, it was a fingerprint.
Oh, fingerprint. Okay.
Yeah, they went to Interpol and the fingerprint of Billy did not match the fingerprint of Paul McCartney when Paul, unfortunately, and back in 1960 was arrested in Germany on suspicion of arson, which he did not do. But the club owner was just upset with the Beatles because they decided to quit their club and go to another club, which was competition.
Oh.
So the club owner went to the German police and said that, George is playing in my club and he's underage. So George got deported.
Oh,
and Paul, because they lived in the basement of this nightclub, and Paul was moving out and there was no light down there. And so he lit a stove and he left it lit and it scorched the wall.
Oh.
So the club owner went to the police and said that, Paul McCartney tried to burn down my club and, scorched my wall. So he got arrested in Germany and they fingerprinted him. And those fingerprints did not match the 1980 fingerprints when he was in Japan.
Wow. So, I mean, you guys, that's what I'm saying is when you start reading this, I mean, way before I knew anything about that, I was already in. I was already like, oh my God, they did it. and how we didn't have a clue. We didn't have a clue.
Yeah. But now you do, and that's what's important. And that's what's I believe is important, is that now that there was deception. Right. And just like how the rumor started in the first place is a lie. It did not start in the United States by some college students in Michigan in 1969. That rumor started in London in September 1966. And that came from Tony Burrow. In his book, he wrote about it. And he said, and he was the Beatles press officer.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's a Beatle insider. And he said that rumor started in London in September 1966, in the mid.
Well,
So it's somewhere between the 10th and the 20th.
those guys got to be still afraid for their life to disclose anything. I mean, it's not like, a certain, certain amount of time that it's safe to talk about anything. I mean, the Crown is still going to try to squash anything about Lady Di, anything about Paul, anything, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They can't have those things disclosed. But when you reach out of the base band, there's so many circumstantial evidence. How could it not? Is the question.
Right. Well, it's like you put this puzzle together. And originally, the premise is the frame of the puzzle, but then you beautifully put piece after piece after piece for me. Honestly, I read it twice. That's why it looks this way. It's a little dog-eared because it was like, oh my God. And I didn't catch it all the first time. I have to say, I'm really glad I read it the second time. And I still can't remember all the details, but it was brilliant. And they must have had people so afraid to speak up that everyone played along, but you can see the Beatles aren't happy about it. That's probably why they had to do something to drastically change their thing. Because how was John supposed to be on stage with this guy that I would think, I mean, I followed this Beatle thing in Quora online, and they're always asking, well, did John like Paul's this, or did Ringo like, they're always asking about the band, and I'm following it, and people just don't have a clue. They don't have a clue of what John and George and Ringo had to go through with this imposter standing there and taking over the creative process. That there was a dance that John and Paul had.
Yeah, it was a perfect match. It was a perfect partnership that John and Paul had. They were a powerhouse, as George said, and even the Rolling Stones said the Beatles were like the four-headed monster. You couldn't beat them when they got together. They were just, it was something to sit back and watch and admire. How John and Paul could just go off to a corner of a room and knock out a song in 20 minutes. Who does that?
I know. I know. Well, yeah, but so again, okay, I want to make sure people know that you also created you just published a Spanish version of this book.
Yes, we did.
So even though we're speaking in English, we want to make sure that people know that they can have this if they have Spanish speaking friends. And I think, the Beatles music changed the world. It went worldwide, and it wasn't just English speakers. It was everyone loved them.
Yeah, they were the first international band. They brought people together. You take two people from two different countries that don't know each other, and you say you like the Beatles. Yeah, well, now you just became friends. You both have something in common. You could talk about something, about them, and you're instant friends. And that has happened to me time and time again on this journey of 10 years, being on Facebook and meeting other people that are just Beatle fans from all over the world. And it's just a wonderful journey. It's a beautiful story, actually. And I'm so thankful for all those friends that I have all over the place.
Right.
Tolerate me.
Well, the thing is we want to honor the work that you and Marianne have done to research and bring this all to light, because each clue, I'm telling you, it was like a puzzle. It was like you take the box of the puzzle and you make the outside frame, and then you're putting things in, but you didn't miss a piece. I felt that everything built on each part of the storyline. So I was there, and I was a witness to all of it. So it really was, it's not biased, it's not pointing fingers, it's not, there's not a lot of anger or sadness, or it's really an interesting way that you wrote it. It's like a research book novel.
Thank you. Thank you. I went
Yeah.
back to original material from the 60s. I collect newspaper articles, magazines, anything I could get my hands on, to create this book. So yeah, I can't say enough. I enjoy it. And the more I research them, the more I'm just in awe of them and how they were so close, and just the positive change that they brought to the world. And it was taken out too soon.
Right. Well, music is one of our best ways to bring us all together. And again, the name of the book is The Shadow of a Bassman. It's by Anne Walsh and Marianne Howard. And again, this book is available now in Spanish as well as English. And then the new book, which I got right before Christmas, I guess my Christmas present to me, is called Shadow Dancing: Rise of a Bassman by Anne Walsh and Marianne Howard. So Anne, is there anything else that we could tell people of how to get a hold of you and how they can, because I know more people are going to want to know more about all of this. What's the best way to connect?
We have a website now. We just got that running, and it's shadowofthebassman.com. I have a Gmail, and it's theshadowofthebassman.com. Everything is The Shadow of the Bassman. And also on Facebook, we have a Facebook group, and it's The Shadow of the Bassman on Facebook.
Wonderful.
And then we have a YouTube channel also, and that's The Shadow of the Bassman. So everything is
it's so perfect.
It's everything for him.
And you can see, there, this is the representation of Paul, is the loving, happy, joyful kidder,
Oh yeah,
prankster kind of guy.
He was a jokester.
Yeah.
Yes, he is very, that's another thing too. You could go into the different personalities. I mean, Paul was just a happy-go-lucky gentleman, very polite, very kind-hearted, didn't have any airs about him. He was not conceited at all. He's a very humble man. Loved animals, loved children, loved his fans. He was just wonderful. He's brilliant, highly intelligent, got easygoing.
Yeah.
Person, and everybody kind of gravitated towards him because he was such an easygoing person, and he was labeled as the friendliest Beatle. Yeah. So people kind of just went to him.
I think the girls all loved him. I mean, I think it was him bouncing, and everybody, your eyes, where you're saying he was keeping time because they couldn't hear each other. Mm-hmm. I just thought he had the energy.
And he did.
You know what I mean? So it was like all eyes on him for sure. Although I liked all of them. And again, in hindsight, I'm seeing how the British invasion changed everything. But at the time, I was just glad it was there. It was just so different. I mean, Elvis was at the same time as the Beatles. Ew.
And they loved Elvis. They were influenced by Elvis and Chuck Berry and Little Richard.
Yeah, Little Richard's amazing too. These guys, the energy that was given out was the energy of hope. It's actually perfect for us now because we're going through so many changes, to be able to read this and really get into, okay, I've got to be critical, but I also want to focus on the good stuff. The good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he's a great humanitarian. What he was doing behind the scenes of Beatlemania is just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I look forward to everyone getting a hold of their book and reading it twice like I have. And and I can't wait to read the next one and hear what else is gonna be on your road to success. It's just a wonderful gift that you've given us. Thank you so much, Anne.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show, and thanks to the listeners. Shadow the Bassman and shadow dancing is our gift to everybody to read it and to research it and
Oh, we're gonna
help them on their journey.
We're gonna want more, you know it.
Well, book 3 is in the works.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, we have to sign off now, but please, everyone, do yourself a favor and get the book, get one for a friend too, because you're gonna want to discuss it. You're gonna be like, really? Because the depth of information really will be an eye-opener for everyone, I think. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you.